So. I guess it is.
All right, I'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. I would like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. This meeting is open to the public in accordance with Phase 4 guidance issued by the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Illinois State Board of Education. Individuals are required to wear a face covering at all times while in the building, including during the meeting. The capacity in any room is limited to 50, and seats will be spaced a minimum of 6 feet apart. A COVID-19 screening will be conducted for all attendees. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Mrs. Junk. Here. Mr. Carey.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
I am here.
Mrs. Witt.
Here.
All right, with 7 members present, we do have a quorum. Would anyone like to move something from consent to do business? Seeing none, we'll move to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second? Second. And a roll call.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to the board and superintendent salutes.
Yes, we'll start as we continue to introduce our new staff across the district. I'll turn it over to Dr. Atkins, and he will be introducing or allowing our new staff members from Harder and the Fox Valley Career Center to introduce themselves.
Good evening. Thank you again for allowing us to bring our newest staff members to the board meeting to introduce themselves and give you an opportunity to connect a voice and a set of eyes to a name. So I want to start by introducing our new middle school staff, starting with our newest principal, Mr. Nathan Schmidt. So Nathan, if you want to come up, Nathan's going to introduce each of his teachers, and then we'll switch to Fox Valley Career Center. Nathan, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for having us here. So the first teacher I would like to introduce is McKenna Gillespie. And what I did today was I went and talked to some of our students to kind of find out some little facts about the teachers or what they had to say. So I tried to kind of give you some humor with this. So she's a really good teacher. She covers the curriculum really well. First time in all my years I've ever heard a student use the word curriculum. But I wish she would give us more time to just chat with our friends. So spoken like a true middle school student.
Yes.
Hi, I'm McKenna Gillespie. I teach 8th grade ELA and social studies here at the middle school.
So our next teacher is Nicole Nelson. When I talked to a student, his first words were, "She's pretty chill." And then I gave him a look and he goes, "I mean, she's really nice and she's always encouraging us." So that was his response.
I'm Nikki Nelson. I'm here at Harder. I teach 8th grade special ed.
So our next teacher is Alana Warren, and when I talked to one of her students, the student told me she does a good job in class and also posting activities to Canvas that are pretty easy to do, so I like that.
Hi, my name is Alana Warren. I am the PE teacher here at Harder Middle School.
And our last teacher, who could not be here this evening, is Lisa Duell. And when I reached out to a staff member, because she's actually servicing all of our remote kids, they responded and said she does a great job reaching out to all of the students that she teaches and supports. So.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. I'd like to introduce Dr. Burchell, who's going to introduce his newest administrator and teachers from Fox Valley Career Center. So, Dr. Burchell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I would like to start by introducing our new assistant director, Ms. Vita Martin. Ms. Martin comes to us with a full career, and she spent the last 14 years working in student services and the, not Sandwich. It is Sandwich. Thank you, Vita. I lost it there for a second. And so she's brought lots of great energy, and we're very excited to have her with us.
Good evening. Like Dr. Burchell said, my name is Vita Martin. I'm the new assistant director at Fox Valley Career Center, and I am at the Meredith Building 4 days a week and at main campus 1 day a week. And I do want to thank Dr. Lawler for an excellent experience in engaging leaders at Waubonsie. So thank you so much.
Good to see you, Vita.
Next up, our new criminal justice instructor is Mr. Mike Houston. Mike comes to us after 29 years with the Kane County Sheriff's Office in corrections, and our new second-year program is focused on corrections. Talk to the students, and they just really feel he brings a strong sense of mastery of the subject, and they think he's funny but quiet. So.
Hello, I'm Mike Houston, and as Dr. Burchell stated, I teach the criminal justice class at the Meredith campus over at Kaneland High School. It's nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you.
Next up tonight is our new auto instructor who comes to us from Fairbury, Nebraska. This is Mr. Tom Scott, and Tom has taught in a number of different areas. He's kind of a jack of all trades in the industrial arts field, and talked to a student yesterday who said, I am learning so much about cars right now. I learned so much that I don't even know where to start. I'm a little worried he's going to take his dad's car apart right now, and I don't know if he's there yet. Come on.
Thank you, Dr. Burchell. I'm Tom Scott. Again, like you said, I'm teaching at Fox Valley Career Center in the auto mechanics area. I teach Auto 1 and Auto 2. I have 2 classes of Auto 1 and 1 of Auto 2. Excuse me. Yes. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. And our welding instructor is with us this evening. This is Mr. Darren Limbeck, who's coming to us from Missouri. Darren has taught 2 different vocational schools, welding, and also has worked in the trades as a welder as well. He is having our students go through something called SP2 safety training, and the kids complained about it. And then the other day, a student told him, you know, my dad went through SP3 training for his work, and he got a pay raise, and that has really elevated their interest in the program.
Good evening. I'm Darren Limback. I teach welding technology over at Fox Valley Career Center. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final instructor got called away tonight. Mrs. Jill Chipetta is one of our health occupation instructors, and she still is on call in the evenings with Mercy and Aurora, and they had something come up and they asked her to come in. So she wasn't able to join us tonight, but she is doing a great job. The instructor she's working with is also working remotely, so she's the one in the classroom, and lots of hands-on experience, and the kids really seem to be enjoying what she's doing with them.
Thank you again, and I do want to take the opportunity to highlight the fact that the CTE program at Fox Valley is doing so well that people are now flocking to Illinois from as far away as Missouri and Nebraska to join our team, so congratulations to Fox Valley for that. Thank you. Next week we will have our high school staff here to be introduced, and we appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. If you draw your attention to the same left side of the audience, in a second I'm going to have our principal stand. As you know, October is Principal Appreciation Month, so in conjunction with the Illinois Principals Association and the Governor's Office, they do declare that October is Principal Appreciation Month. Principal Appreciation Week, as dictated by Governor Pritzker, is October 19th through the 24th, so it's the end of the meeting before our next meeting, and then Principal Appreciation Day is on October 23rd. So what I'll do is I'm going to read the names, and you have met a couple of them over the last couple meetings and over the last couple years, and fortunately they are also here for the SIP presentation, so not only will you get to see them now, you'll get to see them present in just a few minutes. But if you would stand and stay standing till you're all introduced, and then I'll let you sit down before I read a little bit of the proclamation. But first, as you just saw, Dr. Burchell from the Fox Valley Career Center. If you would stand, Dr. Burchell, thank you. Mrs. Maris from Kaneland High School.
She's here.
Is she around the corner? I can't see her. Mr. Schmidt from Harder. Mrs. Huber from John Shields. Mrs. Aversa from John Stewart. Mrs. McCoy from Blackberry Creek. And Mr. Countryman from Kaneland McDowell. So I'd like to just share a note of appreciation and thank you, as we have when we've met our new teachers over the last 3 meetings, all of the hard work and dedication that our principals have put in, and it's a little bit in the proclamation that I'll read in a second, but just to conclude last school year in such a unique manner and then start this school year in a challenging manner. Just like to recognize and say thank you to all of our principals. We greatly appreciate your work, so thank you. And since we do receive the official proclamation, I do want to share a couple of the whereases that are included from the state. The first one is that school principals play an integral role in the education and growth of children in elementary, middle, and secondary schools across the state of Illinois. And whereas school principals are responsible for promoting education and building relationships with parents and teachers to ensure that each child receives services to meet their needs and excel in the classroom. Whereas Illinois Principals Association represent over 5,800 educational leaders statewide, believes that learning is a lifelong process and principals help lead that process. And we close with, whereas school principals and learning leaders have faced unprecedented challenges related to COVID-19 during the 2019-20 school year and preparing to reopen the school year for the 2021 school year. And with that, please join me again in recognizing and thanking our principals. So thank you. And also you'll see in a few minutes that they also do a great job putting together a school improvement plan. But with that, those are our salutes. President Sparber.
Thank you. The board also has a salute tonight. So Dr. Layden often salutes others, but tonight we would like to take a moment to salute him for his leadership in planning for and during the school year as well. The board appreciates the extra effort of so many this year, including parents, students, teachers, and all employees, as well as Dr. Layden. In addition to the board, your colleagues have been thankful for your leadership as well, so I'd like to share with you a few of their comments.
Oh, no.
Don't you love surprises?
Yes.
Yes, you do. This summer, I again realized why I love Kaneland. It is our leadership. Dr. Layden takes the time to look at every option from the student perspective first. He exhibited flexibility, problem-solving ability, and always prioritized people first. I distinctly remember one summer session when we were vetting specific learning structures, and I personally was struggling with the option of not seeing students this fall. I had to step out because I was emotional at the moment. Dr. Layden spent the next 2 days checking in on me as a person, making a point to make me laugh, and caring for me as an individual. He is masterful at keeping focus on the task at hand, but also reading his staff and supporting us all. Thank you. Also, Dr. Layden helped us to stay the course, even when it was difficult. He made sure that the students were the forefront of every decision that was made. Another person said Dr. Layden's communication through this pandemic has been timely, informative, and caring. Also, a special thank you to Dr. Layden for his leadership during these challenging times. I greatly appreciate that he always puts the best interest of our students first. Thank you, Dr. Layden. And finally, I have appreciated Todd's calm leadership during this time. He has continuously shown his appreciation for the work being done by the administration, is patient and understanding as concerns are shared, and he trusts the work and decisions being made without a need to micromanage. He takes the time to listen to the impact, ask questions, and genuinely cares about the outcome of his decisions. I am thankful for being part of a district that took the time to work out all the details, even on plans that we are not using, to not rush to make decisions, but willing to make some very difficult ones. And I think our staff, students, and families are appreciative of the outcome. So we'd also like to thank you and salute you tonight. And this is for you, so thank you.
Thank you. That's awesome. Now that we're taping these, I'll be able to share it and save it and send it to my mom so that she can watch this summer. Thank you very much, and thank you for the kind words from my colleagues and administrators. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so now we will move on to public comments. Let me get to my right page. The board values public input to inform our decision-making and to provide information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. For that reason, the board does not enter into debate or respond to questions spontaneously or without proper investigation and deliberation. In most cases, concerns or questions requiring follow-up will be referred to the superintendent. If you choose to speak publicly, we ask that you do so at the microphone, state your name and village of residence or your association with us for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less so that all who wish to speak may have that opportunity. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject. You're encouraged to seek a private appointment to discuss matters concerning individual students or staff members. While public education can be an emotional issue, and understandably so, the board strives to maintain a certain level of decorum at the meeting. Those who speak are expected to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. The floor is now open to public comment, and I believe we have one for Chris Bateman. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Chris Bateman. I'm a resident of Elburn, and I have a daughter that attends Kaneland Blackberry Creek. She's in the 3rd grade. My question and concern to the board is, when will we get any sort of direction on a plan to return to full-time education and full-time learning days, particularly as it regards to the elementary students? I know that there are several districts in the area that are returning to school full-time, whether it be in a shortened day or in a full regular day. Some of those include District 200, and for elementary ages in District 303 and U46. We received a calendar update this week that extended the hybrid plan through the end of the year, but there was no communication that came with that. It was just simply posted out on the website for parents to download and manage through the end of the year. So I'm curious as to how that's going to be happening. In regards to the remote learning days that we're currently going through, I don't feel that we're having enough work for our students that's maintaining. We are doing a good job of doing the consolidated learning plan on the days that the students are in school, and my daughter has learned a tremendous amount that way. But on average, she's spending 1.5 hours to 2 hours maximum on homework on the days that she's not in school. And I'm just not sure that that's an acceptable amount of application to make sure that we're getting a thorough amount of learning as compared to if they were in school all day long. Finally, a question from my daughter to the board. She's asked me multiple times, and I don't know how to answer this for her. She said, "Dad, I often hear on the news that we're supposed to wear masks if and when we can't be socially distant. However, our desks are spaced appropriately in the classroom, and I still have to wear my mask all day. I get no opportunity to take this off, except for when I'm outside and stand against the wall or when I'm eating lunch. It doesn't bother me to wear it all the time, but I'm just curious as to why, if we are socially distant, we still have to wear it all the time." Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments tonight? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Tonight, the consent agenda consists of the following action items: approval of Treasurer's Report, September 2020, approval of minutes of the September 28th, 2020 regular meeting, approval of resignations and employment of staff, approval of destruction of audio recordings from closed session meetings from March 2019, approval of 2021-22 budget calendar, and the following informational items: the enrollment report, September 30th, 2020, first quarter budget report, and employee position report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
And Mrs. Junk.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to new business. J1, presentation of school improvement plan.
Yes, just a quick review of the process and what the next steps would be and how it's shifted slightly over the years, over the last 3 or 4 years. If you recall, if you've been on the board long enough or remember looking into it, each of the schools would have had a specific goal or two that they would highlight and target for the year. They were all somewhat parallel and targeted, but they were different. And so each school would do something slightly different. But over the last couple of years, as we've tried to drive the EC12 direction, we have changed some of that to make it more targeted, which you'll see with fewer goals, more targeted goals, and district-wide goals for students, staff, and administration. And then also along with that, you'll see as part of the presentation some of the other focus areas. So while you'll hear Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh share what the primary target goals are, you'll also hear other areas of focus because there are still a number of other initiatives and focus in each of the buildings that they have outside of the school improvement plan. And then as a follow-up, in the spring, after we fully implement the plan, it's either late spring or early summer, I can't remember whether it's May or June, but we do come back with the board with a report on how we did with our findings. So you will see that, you'll hear that tonight, and then you'll see the follow-up report later in the spring. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh, and they will introduce our principals as they come up and share their respective areas. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. We did want to start with a little bit of an overview of our new strategic plan, Kaneland Connects. We realize the plan isn't fully unveiled and put out to the public quite yet, but we wrote the school improvement goals in conjunction with a lot of the commitments within the plan. So a little bit of a background or overview of the plan, just to give it a little bit of context. Kaneland Connects is our new strategic plan that we went through the writing process and drafting process with multiple stakeholders throughout the year last year. Unfortunately, the plan meetings were cut a little bit short because of COVID and the stay-at-home order, and so it was completed through a virtual means. Throughout this year, we've been trying to decide the best time to really recommit to Kaneland Connects and unveil that strategic plan. It will be coming out later this school year or later into the spring and possibly the fall. We constantly are trying to monitor what is the appropriate time for staff and community to truly engage in it. Having that being said, Kaneland Connects is based on 5 commitment areas, all of which have previously been started with our Kaneland 2020 plan, which was our previous strategic plan leading up to the new one. You can see our school improvement goals tonight linked to that Kaneland Connects plan and the work that had already been started with our previous plan of Kaneland 2020. The 5 commitment areas in the new strategic plan that continued from the previous plan were one-to-one learning, which has become very important this year, obviously, with our different learning structures. Proficiency-based progress and making sure we have teacher clarity and student clarity of what is it that I'm learning today and what is it that my expectation for proficiency is as a teacher to the student. Multi-tiered systems of support, which is a continuation of our response to intervention, but looking at the whole child more collectively and collaboratively rather than isolated response to intervention, interventions for the student or actions for the student. And then social emotional learning, which again, always has a priority, and I know you heard a previous report and update on it at the last board meeting, but has become even more important for this school year because of our different learning styles. And then standards-based grading, which I know you've heard multiple updates throughout the time, but those are our 5 commitment areas. You'll see in the presentation that our school improvement goals really link to all of those in some way, linking to the ability to know what it is that I'm learning through my I can statements, knowing what proficiency looks like, both as a teacher and a student, engaging in those learning experiences of that I can statement through virtual means with one-to-one, engaging in the learner profile through technology means is linked to one-to-one, and then being able to know our students so well with the learner profile that we social emotionally can support them in an individual basis or tiered basis through multi-tiered systems of support. The really emphasis of our commitments, and you can see tonight most of us have the committed and connected shirts on, because that really is the focus of the plan. To be able to commit to our students and to our teachers, we know what we need you to learn as a teacher. We know how, as a student, we want proficiency to be seen through the I can statements, and then be able to know our students through the learner profile so that we can adapt instruction to the needs, both social, emotionally, and academically of the student. So if you look at our process, it was slightly different this year. Typically, in the spring of every year, we review our past data from school improvement, pull K-12 stakeholders together, teachers, administrators, and kind of review our data collectively and say, where are we? What is our next step? And then what should our next step goals be? Unfortunately, with the stay-at-home order, that had to be done a little bit virtually and with a much smaller stakeholder group to write the goals. The process for 2021 looks very similar with some of those pieces missing in the stakeholder, bigger face-to-face meetings. We did start in May, looking at our progress of last year and really looking at the February 2020 data, which was collected. Unfortunately, we didn't have students on site, and so we couldn't collect the May data points for last year. Based on our progress, we met administratively in the summer to really outline, so what is our next step of the goal? Educational research for implementation notes that if you hit an 85% mark of initiative you're implementing, you're ready to add the next step on. Currently, we were under that 85% mark, and so this is our goal for this year for both of our school improvement goals, is to get to that 85%. So we know our culture and structure is ready for the next additional step. This September, we did start the data collection, which we'll talk about with the 2 individual goals and how that is collected. That went September through October, and one of the cycles doesn't close until next week, or 2 weeks, October 25th. AD team, as all the administrators here, as well as the assistant principals, we all collectively meet also and plan common professional development that is key from early childhood through 12th grade to make sure we're continually and consistently presenting activities to staff so that their progression with the goals continues as well. And then we will go back out in January and February and collect the post data. It seems early to collect it by February, but with evaluation cycles of administrators and staff, you have to have your student growth goals concluded at that time so that we can put it into the evaluative process. A little bit of our focus is that staying connected and committed, which when we thought of that, it has never meant more than where we are right now. With our variety of learning structures and the variances of where students are, fully remote, on-site, but socially distanced, that connection is really important. We look at how can we stay connected with all of our students no matter where they're learning from. How can we stay connected in collaboration so that we know we're teaching consistently the I can statements to students no matter what type of learning structure they're in. And then we want to make sure we stay committed to knowing our students and being able to intervene based on what they social emotionally need as well as academically. And so those 2 words, although we developed them way before COVID-19, have never meant more than this year. Our first goal that I'm going to talk about and then turn it over to Mr. Rowley is the learner profile goal. This is our 4th year with the learner profile. It is the same template as past years, that it's about 19 slides, that the students go through and reflect on certain sides per grade span. They can reflect on all of them, or we really hone in on the specific slides that are important to your developmental level as a student. Once the student does that, we hope then they will share that learner profile with their teachers and have conversations with the teachers of, here's my learning style, how can I either risk take and try learning through a different style, or based on this and based on my learning needs, how can we adapt some of the learning environment? And so we ask the students when we go out to reflect on the learner profile, what is it that you know and have learned about yourself? What can you tell me from the learner profile that you know about your personal learning needs? And then what do you do with that information? Do you share it with a peer? Do you share it with your teacher? How do you advocate for yourself? The ultimate goal of the learner profile is that students really feel empowered to advocate, could I do this assignment this way? Or in this setting, could I work with a partner? Or could I have some alone time if it's a group project, and advocate for their needs along the way? The learner profile goal is collected K3 in a handwritten format where students reflect on that based on a prompt. What do you know about yourself as a learner? And then how do you advocate for your needs based on what you know? And then 4th through 12th grade, it is collected through a Canvas module with a similar prompt. They have opening videos to kind of explain what I'm explaining now that they can watch either in class or when they do it independently. And then it's those written products are then reviewed on a scale of 0 through 3. 0 means that maybe they drew something or just really nothing that linked to learning. We had a couple of, I enjoy football, or, my favorite color is blue. And so those are some 0 responses where they may have thought about something they liked, but it didn't really have a distinct connection to learning. In some cases, if it had a kind of connection, it's more of a level 1. They're able to recognize something from their learner profile or something about themselves as a learner. Part of the learner profile is also, what are your family traditions? What are your hobbies? And so even on the written response, if they wrote something like, I like to play football, that could be a reflection from the hobby slide in the learner profile, but since it didn't connect to learning, it couldn't go beyond a level 1. In level 2, in the rubric, in those written, if they were able to say, this is how I learn best, or this is how I do work best, or I enjoy working with a group when it comes to discussing my reading book, that is a definite response of something that they see themselves in a comfort level in learning. And then we hope then that they move that into advocacy, which is really level 3. And starting even at some of the kindergarten levels, we had some level 3s, all the way up obviously into high school, and we had some level 0s at the high school. So it all just kind of depends on how reflective the child is. A level 3 may say something like, I like to work with my peers, and I let my teacher know for certain projects, may I work with a partner? Or I like a very popular one that we hear is that they like dim lights or music playing, and so they request that of their teacher. Could they wear their earbuds or AirPods, whatever they're called, and while they're doing the independent work. This year was a very unique one because the learner profile was collected both fully remote and hybrid, and you couldn't really tell a difference between the two. Some of the fully remote were even putting how they advocate, and they asked their parent. I asked my parent for a specific safe space for learning, or I asked my parent to not interrupt, when doing a certain project, or I asked if I can talk with my brother to plan this project. And those were things and responses we hadn't seen up until this year, so it was unique to see that even when at home, students know I need to advocate for my needs no matter where I am learning from. Mr. Rowley is going to go over our pre-data for learner profile, and then our second goal of proficiency base.
Good evening. Talking a little bit, as Dr. Mumm had mentioned, we use these goals for quite a few different processes, goal setting obviously, making sure when we are developing professional development, when we're developing certain trainings, that we have a focus. And I think over the last couple of years, as an administrative team, as a staff, we've done a really, really good job of aligning our goals, our professional development to our strategic plan. There is a bit of this that speaks to the evaluation side as well. For all of our evaluations, we need to make sure that there is a student growth component, and we use these for the student growth piece, so there's a need to report out on some of that data. Tonight, the pre-data, and as Dr. Layden said, in the springtime, coming back to see how we've done. So the first part, looking at the pre-data for the learner profile slides, before skipping ahead to the actual numbers, when we set our goals to be as transparent as possible, when we're setting those goals, it's important that we communicate what it looks like to be proficient in that goal, what it looks like to be distinguished in that goal, and then unfortunately, as we scale that down a little bit, what it looks like to if we haven't met that and we need some improvement, or if we're way off the mark of what unsatisfactory looks like. As we look at this, there is some timing issues. We have to have our student growth goal and our evaluations done by February. We want to make sure that we put in an entire effective year in. So our goals are looking at from the February time of last year through February of this year. So we're looking at an entire year's growth. So we're not just August, late August to early February. We're actually getting an entire calendar year in there. And when we set those benchmarks, we're looking at a proficiency goal this year, or being proficient in evaluation. If we are showing growth in our level 2s and level 3s, as Dr. Mumm had explained those, that get us between 81 and 83%, 81 and 82%, and then our proficient is 83 to 85. And then our distinguished benchmark would be 85 or higher. Once we've hit that 85% benchmark, we know that we have these practices, that they're embedded in practices, and we're ready for looking at what customized paths could look like. The pre-data for what we've collected So far, this is the one whose window is open until October 25th. We have about 550 of the 840 samples collected so far, and we're sitting right at about 48%. It's a little bit lower from where we ended last year in our last data collection piece, but when we went back and looked historically where we start, we have made gains in our pre-data over the last 3 years. So that summer slide, if you will, we've made growth going all the way back the last 3 years. We are at about 30%, so we've almost grown 20% in our pre-data. So it's good to see that these practices are becoming more and more embedded. Students are used to not only speaking the language, but they're used to putting those practices into place and can speak to their own learning needs. Next piece talks a little bit about that data collection. We scaled back just due to circumstances with limited people in the classrooms, limited students here, and just timing and things that are going on throughout the school day. So we scaled back our sample size from about 1,200 to a little less than 850. We're right at about 840. Our trainers, the data collectors for this piece, the ones that scored the writing piece, we made sure that we sat down and did a training. So as everyone went through and scored those pieces, we pulled sample written pieces of all different levels, scored them ourselves, opened them up for discussions of why I rated this a 2, why I rated this a 3, and then shared out what could be some of those distinguishing pieces between each of those benchmarks. And like we said, we had 840 students randomly polled from all grade levels, all buildings were represented in that pre-data. The next goal is our proficiency-based progress goal. Again, the framework for this is the same that it has been in the years past, but we are still looking to accelerate that percentage up to 85% in our proficiency-based progress goals. This one, if you remember, ties to I can statements and feedback. As we look on kind of the back end of this and behind the scenes piece and looking at research, we know that feedback and timely feedback is critically important to the success of our students. Teachers being very clear in what their expectations are is critical to the success of our students. So this goal is written to emphasize that and make sure that on a daily basis, our students know what they're learning, what the expectation is when they come into the classroom for learning, and then the feedback that they receive is targeted to that specific outcome for the day. So when we look at this, and we do interviews with our students, scoring them on a 0, 1, 2, or 3. A 0 would be that they do not know what the I can statement is. So they're unaware of what the learning should be for that day or what the objective is for that day. A level 1 would be that they can identify it. So maybe they're going into an English language arts class and they know that I can write a point and counterpoint in an argumentative essay. A level 2 then gets into the feedback piece. So not only can the student identify what that I can statement is for the lesson, but they've received targeted feedback for that specific piece. So they've submitted writing, maybe they've submitted a video, and the teacher's giving them direct feedback to that of, you did a great job solidifying what your point is, but we had no evidence or we did not provide a counterpoint to the argument. And then that 3, when we look at the student that is taking that feedback, they're able to see what their next step is within that specific I can't statement or within that specific standard. So they go through that whole process. They know what they're supposed to learn. They've received that targeted and timely feedback for that objective, and they know what their next steps are going to be. Because the teacher has shared this feedback with me, I know that I need to practice my referencing a text to support a counterpoint. And that would take them through the whole process all the way up through the 3. Again, when we look at our levels, when we get into that evaluation side, when we get into the goal piece, we're looking at a distinguished level of greater than up to 85% or greater as for our proficiency-based progress, and our proficient is between 82 and 85%. Our pre-data, again, we have some work to do. It's not as high as it was when we last left off in the spring, but looking back historically, again, we've made gains. So that's telling us that we don't have to do a lot of the groundwork with figuring out how to write an ICANN statement. We've done a lot of that work as we've developed reported standards and proficiency tables. Anywhere from 3 years ago, we were right at about 16% when we started doing this. And this year, with all of those data pieces collected and scored, we're just shy of about 30% of students that are at that 2 or the 3. So they're getting that feedback. About a third of our students are receiving that feedback, and then they know what to do with that towards for the next step in their learning for that objective. Before we turn it over to Ms. Huber, are there any questions about any of that information so far?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'm too used to working in the non-academic world. So if we're starting year 4 of a program and we still haven't reached proficient, that wouldn't work so well in the rest of the world. So I guess, what are you going to do differently in year 4 that you didn't do in the first 3 years to get us to that 85%?
Great question. So looking at, for a couple different pieces, what we saw with the first year, specifically for the learner profile, introducing it.
Right,
there was
yeah.
a lot of language kids weren't familiar with, so a lot of that was building the background knowledge. Then what we needed to do over the last couple of years was put specific professional development in places for teachers to actually take that tool, because it was a change from what they were used to, and embed it into their practices. And that was over the course of the last couple of years of looking at that a couple of different ways of what it could look like on a daily basis. How do I embed that into my instructional practices? Different ways to do that. We looked at different ways to introduce language with students, different activities, and what we've done as an administrative team from a professional development standpoint is we look at different pieces of not only the learner profile, but proficiency-based progress, and we vet that as an administrative team, and then our principals take that to the building. They'll do that professional development with their staff, get feedback on it. We make adjustments as we go, and the timeline for that has been, it's been increasing over the last couple of years and making that growth, but as we identify some gaps, we develop that PD, we put it into place, we vet it, bring it to our teachers.
Okay.
In the last 3 years, too, to add to that, this was always a 4-year goal, and as Ed Service, we projected out the percents that we wanted to grow to each year. And like for the learner profile specifically, we met our benchmarks in those years, all except 1. And we came just about 2 percentage points under, and so that we added more to make sure we met last year. And so, yes, the 85% is our end goal, but it hasn't been our end goal on year 1.
No, I
It's
wouldn't
our end
expect it
goal.
to be on year 1.
Yeah.
But, all right, so you're telling me that this is year 4 and we're done and moving on to a new goal next year?
Yeah, hopefully. The idea, if you look at the kind of the whole process, is all 3 of these cells. There's 3 cells that move us towards a personalized learning environment. The first one is learner profile. The second one is proficiency based. And then the third one that would come when those 2 are solidly have a foundation in the district at 85% is customized paths. And so our goal would then shift to implement customized paths for students, yes.
Okay. I heard that you've done, the first year you introduced it, the second and third year you've done professional development and more training in the classroom so that teachers and students better understand the material. I haven't heard what's different this year that's going to push us over the top.
Sure. The feedback piece, so we've looked at the cycle of feedback and how that has been different than what it's been in the past. It's been different practices where typically feedback in the past has been, I as a teacher am telling you what you need to do. As we've learned more and more, that needs to be more of a collaborative process. So we started that this year. For both of those goals, particularly with the ICANN statements, when we look at teams that are developing those, there's a lengthy process of looking at our academic standards, writing a reported standard competency off of those academic standards, writing what proficiency looks like in those, vetting student work samples. So all of that piece has what's been going over the last 1.5 to 2 years. And in that, just the number of KLCs at our high school, the number of the time that
I'm sorry, KLC?
our learning communities, our professional learning communities, where teachers can get together and dedicate that work is sporadic. It's done in the past. It's been on Thursdays. Now it's hopefully will get to be on Wednesdays. But the way things have been going, we've had some other things that we've needed to prioritize. So that process in itself of taking where we've just used what states have given us or national standards, we've looked at breaking that down to how we can teach those standards to kids. And then it takes some time to do that. Then we start to pull in student work because we want to make sure that the students are showing that they're understanding and that it's having an impact. So then we get that team back together and we look at the student work piece and make adjustments off of all of that.
I think the other thing along with feedback too that's different this year than past years we've really been working on how do I reflect as a learner, and now that students are really showing us they can reflect on their learning needs, is how do I use that for advocacy. And some of the professional development will be around modeling what does advocacy look like in different learning settings and in specific curricular areas. You know, the benefit of a fall like we've had is the learning structures are so varied right now that it allows us the opportunity to say, what does advocacy look like in my home setting, in my application day setting, in my hybrid setting? And so we have the opportunity, the process of modeling advocacy for students has always been in that kind of final year piece. But I think this year, it has definitely been exemplified with COVID and the learning structures. So feedback and advocacy are really the last two pieces that build those goals up to the foundational level we need them to implement customized paths.
And that's what customized paths is part of that plan we haven't seen yet?
It is. Yeah, it's part of you've seen a little bit from the honeycomb model of personalized learning. I know it's been a while.
No, that isn't what I meant. As far as we haven't seen the plan, though.
The Kaneland Connects plan.
Yes.
Yep, it is. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Can you, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. So how do we help along the new teachers, if you will? Obviously, they're going to get students that are in some phase along the way. What are we doing to make them prosper through the process?
Yep. So part of the new teacher orientation and some of the trainings that they do over the summertime recaps what we've done. We have housed, so my predecessor in the Ed Service Department has put together, excuse me, personalized learning academies. It's our beginning institute day. So it's whole days that have been dedicated to these pieces. So a couple of years ago, it was 1.0 was dedicated to learner profile. Then we moved on to proficiency-based progress. As we've gathered feedback, we've added more towards that proficiency-based piece. And a lot of that information has been put together for a learning module for our new staff as a reference for them. We do some of that training in the summertime as onboarding, and then we use our admin professional development days where we're meeting together to help train our building principals, and that's what they're taking back to their staff. So they're seeing those sporadically throughout the year, but we have hit those pretty hard as an entire district with our new hires for the last few years. We are members of the Institute for Personalized Learning, which is based out of Milwaukee, and part of our membership allows us to send for free staff members to 1 or 2 day boot camps. We've had some people take advantage of that in the past. This year, they're coming up in the next couple of weeks. They're done virtually, so it's a little bit different, but we have a few different avenues for our new hires where they can get those more intensive type trainings.
We also have job-embedded required, first and second year teachers are required to meet with the instructional coach. And as part of that, the job-embedded practices of learner profile, as well as reported standards through the ICANN statements, have been part of those cycles. And so it's nice having the instructional coaches do the data collection with administrators, because they can quickly see trends of where they might be doing some job-embedded PD because they're analyzing the data with us and scoring the pieces.
Each year, we have our November Institute Day, our Ignite Day, and those are all staff-led or Kaneland staff-led sessions, and a lot of those will often revolve around feedback process, changing your assessments so you're assessing what your reported standards are. So a lot of that is job embedded in. And that's nice because as a new teacher, I have a couple months to get my feet wet, to get the logistics of the job and start to get into my curriculum. And then I have that day in November where my peers are there. We're working together on some issues that I see come up, authentic issues that come up through the first couple of months. And that's been a really good training for us for the last couple of years as well.
What would you say is your obstacle, or has been your obstacle?
Excuse me.
I can't hear you.
As far as staff coming along, if you will, what is in reality, what is an obstacle that's presented to you guys?
Obstacles.
I would say one of the obstacles we found this year was a little bit of our social distancing structure and masks. In the past, when we would go in to do interviews with students for the I can statements, students were a lot more open to talk, to lean in, to show us something. And this year it was very difficult. We were coming in, you can't really see exactly who I am, and I want to stay kind of far apart. And so in the past, it wasn't as disruptive to collect some of that data, where this year was a little bit more difficult, that we tried to catch them in transition times. And if I go see you at lunch and say, what is a I can statement? There isn't one in the lunchroom, probably. And so they're like, well, what are you talking about? There isn't one in here. So they would have to think back to a period that they just came from, or one from a previous day. And so the data collection was definitely an obstacle this year because of trying to really socially distance, limit people. And if a student doesn't know who I am and I walk in and start to whisper to them in my mask, they were a little freaked out.
I think over the last couple of years of when you're thinking of student advocacy, our students aren't really used to that. They're not used to approaching a teacher and saying, here's how you're teaching me, but I need something different. Our kids are very compliant. They've been going through a very similar structure for their entire life. It's very similar to what their parents have gone through and their grandparents. So as we've stressed more and more of that advocacy piece, I've had conversations with students of, well, I learn better in this way, but there's no way I'm going to tell the teacher that. They're the professional, they know what they're doing. And the advocacy is not questioning their ability as teachers, it's truly sharing how you learn. That learner profile does a great job to help them reflect, and it's been building those structures into place. It's been looking at instructional practices a little bit different, but empowering. I've seen it all the way from kindergarten up through our seniors, and empowering them to be able to advocate for their needs, where it might be as simple as, I need the lights off, to I need to be able to sit far away from my peers in a more comfortable place because I get too distracted by what's going around. So that piece has been a little bit of a struggle to get the mass of our student body to understand that this is okay. There's a respectful way to advocate for yourself.
And probably this year more than ever, you see a lot of students in past years that advocated for alternative seating or to work with a partner, and they know kind of the guidelines of this year of you need to stay apart, you need to stay in your desk. It typically, the community seating of the beanbag chair is no longer available. And so I think students are wondering a little bit of, well, what does it look like? Because things I've advocated in the past are things my teacher now says I can't do. And so we're trying to figure out that model for them this year more so than ever.
So I've heard some positives. Ms. Mom, you mentioned earlier about the first stages, some of the students from home remotely and what have you. It was good to hear.
Pedro, I'm having a hard time hearing you, so could you speak up a little bit, please?
He's advocating for his needs, which I really like.
Ms. Mom, it was great to hear that you had mentioned earlier that as far as those that are remote, that they are succeeding in different ways, taking advantage of the home atmosphere and what have you. And hearing some of and that's why I asked the question about the potential obstacles. Is that hindering potentially the 85% mark that we're shooting for this year? I know this year is an unusual year, and I guess kind of piggybacking on Ryan's initial question, but at the same time throwing the fact that it is an unusual year.
I hope it doesn't hinder it. I think it changes our methods administratively a little bit. We need to model variance in advocacy based on the learning structures we have, hybrid, fully remote, application days. And so, you know, last February, if you would have asked us kind of look forward and what are you going to plan to model, none of those would have been on the list. And so I hope it doesn't hinder getting to that mark, but it changes our course a little bit of what we need to train the staff on in order to share and model for the students.
For sure. And looking at on the surface, we had some of those similar reservations, but when we look at our data, and that's why we kind of did a little bit of a deeper dive for the last few years, our data is higher this year than it has been in the previous two, and that has been in a structure with remote students, with hybrid students. So our data is showing us that even though there are those obstacles, that we're figuring out those ways to do that.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Can you guys speak to me a little bit about your like norming practices for like, you know, how you're evaluating these? Because it says that, you know, multiple people are evaluating, so how are you making sure that the quality of your data is, you know, has good integrity and that kind of thing? So,
Yep. So we do a couple different trainings for one of the pieces. Dr. Munn, myself, and our instructional coaches do the scoring. So we do take, after students have submitted that work, we do take those sample practices and we go through a couple different rounds of scoring. We have, on top of the actual student work samples, we've created several, in each of those point values, the 0, 1, 2, 3, we've created several different scenarios based on what we've seen, based on what people have reported back to us of what it could look like in each of those. Then we go through, we score them, and we have more of that inter-rater reliability conversations. The pieces that for our other goal that we go through the same process. Those that are scoring, we come together, we do some training, some hypothetical examples, some real samples that students grade. We do a set amount together, so as I'm scoring the ones that have been assigned to me, I do have a colleague there. If I do have questions, we go through, we highlight, we underline of this particular phrase to me says that it is more of a 2 than it is a 1. So we're having those conversations together in our some of our administrative professional development meetings.
that's good. If you do see a big discrepancy, what's your process for addressing that?
Going through, I think just kind of breaking down and looking at the language and comparing it to what is asked on the rubric. So the rubric has some very clear benchmarks between what differentiates between a 1, a 2, and a 3, and then look like that's where the highlighting piece and the underlying piece comes through of making sure that we're not reading into it and we're taking that clear sample of what the student work provided to us and saying, this is the exact phrase they're saying, this is where it falls on our rubric. As soon as they talk about feedback or comments that teachers make, that automatically bumps them up to a 2. If they immediately then go and said, okay, I sit down at my seat and then I know that I need to open up to this page or reread this, that additional step will bump them up to a 3. For advocating, if you can identify what the learner profile is, you're at that 1, but when you, again, have you gone up and talked to an adult or your parent or emailed? If you've made that step, that then is that clear indicator into a 2. So looking at the exact language that they've either shared and we've documented or that they've written down for us.
I think the other benefit we have too is our department can look at the data for both the goals and break it down by school and by grade level. Yes, it's randomly sampled and collected, but we know it's equal numbers within grade spans.
Sure.
And so when we've seen an outlier in the past, then we contact the principal and assistant principals and kind of sit with them and say, you know, let's talk about practices. Either you're a really high outlier or you are really low in the data. Are there different professional development pieces that your staff specifically needs? Or what can we learn from your staff because the data came higher? And in some cases, some of the buildings have chosen to do their own informal one in the middle of the goal, just to kind of spot check because they were a low or a high outlier, or just to spot check to see, are we kind of on progress for our February goal. So although you see the data together, the Ed Service Department sees it by building, by grade level, and looks for kind of those odd trends to further investigate with the administrator.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys got good processes, so that's good. Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hubert.
Good evening. I promise I did not pay Dr. Lawler to ask those questions, but mine was all about data monitoring, and since they already really did a thorough job of answering that question, I would like to speak a little bit to some of the questions that were asked. From my perspective as an elementary principal, when we started, we took on the task of having kindergarten through 12th grade kind of learn the same vocabulary, so as they articulate through, we're all talking about the same thing. That takes time, but I do think that from what I've seen this year, those kids that were in kindergarten when we first started really do know what a learner profile is, what its purpose is, and how it benefits them. When we first started, they're just like, we got to color those slides, or my teacher asked me this, but they understand how it affects them and kind of their purpose for doing it. Just to reiterate, we're really looking for the students' understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it. Administrators and instructional coaches have played a key role in helping us keep everybody focused and the ball rolling in the right direction. We did scale back from the 1,200 sample size to about 840, and then all points are collected. The students that K-1-2 that are handwriting theirs, they're collected from all different buildings. I know the group that we did our training and then I looked at, I discussed with assistant principal, and the kids that got a 3, it was a clear 3. I learn best this way. These are the things I need to be the best learner. I asked my teacher for this. For a 3rd grader to be able to say, this is what they need, this is why they need it, and this is how they ask for it, that was huge. I mean, I know it seems like we've been doing this for 4 years. That's tremendous growth in a short amount of time from a principal's perspective.
Sure.
Any questions? They really did answer all the questions. I appreciate it, Lemmy.
Good evening. I'm here to talk about the professional development that we'll be doing that'll help address and pushing through those goals from the EC through 12th grade perspective. So these are things that each staff member will participate in based on the feedback that they've gotten from their principal. So as Mr. Rowley said, our big focus this year is on feedback and focusing on feedback. The Personalized Academy 2.75 will really be where that's starting at with our staff, which will be housed in November, and also during the Ignite conference that we house. So there'll be a large focus on effective feedback, different types of feedback, how students enter into feedback in their learning process. In addition to feedback, there'll also be continued professional development on the reported standards that you find on your report card. There's lots of standards that we teach, but we've narrowed down the focus to the ones that are reported for parents that are the most important and often carry substandards underneath of that. And then additionally, we'll be working on defining proficiency. So each of us who teach have different identification of what proficiency is, but coming together and aligning that will help us meet those Common Core state standards that we have that are those standards. We had talked about this already, about the virtual vetting. So samples have already been collected. There'll be some virtualness so that we can kind of socially distance in the state that we're in. So that those meetings will be starting in November. And then in addressing the learner profile, our students have both asynchronous and synchronous learning of how they can continue to advocate for their needs, how that learner profile helps them grow and develop and evolve, and what they used to think helped them learn best. Maybe they've gotten new information of how they can advocate for themselves. Mr. Countryman's going to talk about EC through 5 and what we're doing.
All right, thank you very much. Just to kind of continue and really hone it in on the early childhood through 5th grade level and kind of our action plans moving forward, we really look and kind of to echo what some of the comments have been made already. We look to keep it consistent all the way EC through 12 in some of our professional development experiences. So we work together a lot at our administrative professional development to develop really in-depth, important experiences for all of our staff members, and then we take that at the EC5 level and have some pillar professional development experiences for our staff throughout the year, really focusing on that learner profile and then the proficiency-based progress. We've been doing this over the past few years and are continuing to do so and be flexible and move with our staff according to need. At each building level, we have that set in stone, but then we'll adjust based on the needs of our specific staff. And like Dr. Mumm was saying, if we get certain data that makes us trend in one direction or the other, we'll make that adjustment at that specific building level. But those professional development pillar days are really important to us that message is consistent across the district and vertically. We also look through our kind of informal and formal evaluation cycles and observation cycles with our staff members to use some of the same practices that we want them to use in evaluating their student work. So looking at proficiency in a number of different areas, and you'll hear us use the words proficiency tables sometimes. And so we have proficiency tables that we've developed that we will use with staff members in a number of different areas. CHAMPS is one of those, and that's a behavior management system and tool that we use across the EC5 grade span, where we can walk into a classroom and those letters stand for different things. So we can look at, do the students have a clear expectation of what their communication level looks like? Do they know how to get help in the classroom? Do they know the details of an activity? So we'll go through those processes and look at our proficiency tables that we've developed at the administrative level, and the staff can get really specific feedback for how they're performing in those areas. And then we look at the same thing for math and writing and reading. And this year, obviously, everything's a little bit different. So some of that time where we would spend in front of a whole group staff meeting or things like that has been moved to Canvas modules. So it's, again, kind of implementing things that we would want our staff members to do for our students, and we're doing it for the staff. So we've developed some challenges where we say, okay, hey, we're going to come out this month, and our focus really, when we walk into your classroom, is going to be centered around the CHAMPS proficiency table. So the staff is clear when we come into that classroom what we're looking for, and then they're clear on where their proficiency lies after we have those formal and informal discussions with them. So that's really part of our action plan, continuing throughout the year with those specific areas of CHAMPS, then math, writing, and reading as we move throughout this year. We also look at consistent professional development. As we created those tables, our staff along the way over the past year here has created some of their own tables in vetting student work. So kind of going to Dr. Lawler's point of how do we make sure that everybody is norming the same way and ensuring that those practices are consistent. We've had to develop that with our staff as well. And so we want to continue that with that professional development. They've gone through and created tables for a number of reported standards for themselves, and in that process worked with colleagues from across the district. We want to continue that work. Might be in a virtual setting this year instead of sitting side by side at the table, but we're going to continue that work in the areas of math, ELA, and all of our exploratory areas as well at the EC5 level. So a lot to do as we move throughout the year. We'll be working through all of these things. I'll pass it on to Mrs. Aversa.
Hi everyone. We have other areas of focus as well at the early childhood through 5th grade. We are still creating the partnerships among our full remote and hybrid learning communities, so tying those together with different activities. We're focusing on the implementation of those revised ELA maps with our new reading tools. We've gotten some positive feedback from teachers, which has been really nice. We're reviewing structures of support through our RTI and looking at shifting to MTSS, multi-tiered system of support. We're continuing to align our interventions that we have in school-wide supports with those with SEL and how it can help our students and staff. We're monitoring and implementing co-teaching in the classrooms in all 4 buildings, so we're continuing to work with on that. And increasing implementation, as you guys know, of using Canvas in all classrooms, all subjects, and helping how can we adapt and change to make the system, you know, user-friendly to all and be a nice system that we can use. And we're continuing to build structures to support collective efficacy among our staff. We know it's a difficult time. We want to support them, and how do we bring them together digitally or even in person safely and continue to support them. So those are other focus areas that we have for early childhood through 5th grade. And I will turn it over to Mr. Schmidt for the middle school.
Just to jump in real quick before Mr. Schmidt comes up here, I'm looking at a couple factors or a couple pieces from a 6-12 lens that will continue to be a focus throughout the year. As we spoke a little bit about earlier, as we look at feedback, as we look at the learner profile, how specifically in our current circumstances do we focus on those? How have the needs of students shifted? An example would be, we know that feedback is best when it's timely. That usually comes in a perfect world or in the past. When our students are in class, I can sit down right next to them. I can give them very timely feedback. Now we are running into circumstances where, based on the day that is, an A day or a B day, some of that feedback is more written than it is in person in that time frame where it's not a week or two later. It might be a day or two later, but we're processing through remote settings, hybrid settings, through the lens of our school improvement plans. And then the other piece that we will be working on in the time frame that we have looks at this more in the spring, but identifying after we've honed in on our academic factors, looking at our core values. We want to make sure that we're reporting out on that because the areas of responsibility and commitment to excellence paint a very true picture of our students. So we want to make sure that we can share out our academic proficiencies and our behavioral proficiencies through those core values. So in the springtime, we will be looking at developing the implementation of that, piloting the implementation of that in a given class period, how to report that out, what does it look like on a report card, what does it look like on a transcript, what does it look like when we're building those tables in different areas. It might be a completely different behavior-wise in math class versus PE, or a traditional class in English language arts versus picking up a tool in an industrial arts class. So deciding what that looks like, what those core values look like, and how they pertain to our students, and what it looks like for reporting. So those are two of the key pieces for a 6-12 action plan, but I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Schmidt to have him go into a little bit more detail.
Good evening. So obviously, as was already stated by the board here, we are facing a year like no other, and that's one of the areas that we've been continuing to focus on, and how to, areas where we need to push our staff and our students at Harder Middle School. So one of the areas that we are continuing to work on is to develop lessons, supports, and activities for both remote students and hybrid students on their remote days, because students are unfortunately only in our building 50% of the time, or not at all if they are fully remote. We were working on supports and interventions for students that have extended absences or significant gaps in learning, some of which trace back to the spring, and some just from extended quarantines that they've had to face this year. The development and adaptation of RTI resources based upon limited time in the building. So how can we best help close those gaps? And then also continuing to work to establish community outreach and partnerships to support our students at home and on their remote days. And I would like to just share with everybody, being obviously a new principal in the building this year, that I have been amazed at our students and our staff at how much they have risen to the challenges of this year, and really going above and beyond. And I do think you need to hear that, because they have been magnificent. So I did want to share that as well. Thank you.
Good evening. At the high school level, we are also taking those learner profiles and the proficiency-based progress and embedding it in everything that we're doing. And so you're going to see that we are also increasing our implementation of the Canvas in all of our classes. We have shared in the past a timeline that we are using for a complete rollout of standard-based grading, and we're following along with that timeline right now. Great deal of our focus, though, is looking to see how do we go about supporting our students and our staff during these times. We are looking at the whole group as well as the individuals. As far as our students go, that support starts with the teacher, whether it be in the classroom or in remote locations. But then we're also looking to see how can we identify the students who are needing additional help beyond that, and it's an all hands on deck. We're looking to see how our MTSS or RTI, student services, and the dean's office can help to support those students. At the same time, we're looking to see how we can support our staff, again, as a whole group as well as individuals, especially during times where staff have had to be quarantined or remote teaching, and how do we help support them and the students in the classroom during that time, using our office staff, our department chairs, and our instructional coaches to support them. During this time, we are always working on our SEL and curriculum work. For the SEL, we are reviewing our services that are being provided, making sure that they are matching what our student needs are, and constantly looking to see if there's program changes that need to be happening. As we continue to roll through this semester and we look to see how are our students truly doing, what are their social emotional needs, what additional programming might be needed to help support them during these times specifically, as well as all times in general. As you're aware, one of the commitment teams for our strategic plan is that SEL commitment team. Part of their goal this year will be to look to see how do we build an awareness of these needs. So at the high school level, we will be coming up with a monthly topic where we will be embedding things into our newsletters, our Squire, communication with our students, staff, and parents about each one of those topics. Curriculum work is also continuing as we continue to prioritize our standards that's based on our standard-based grading timeline, as well as the current hybrid environment. And next up is Fox Valley.
Well, at the risk of pointing out the obvious, I do have my Kaneland committed shirt on. I'm part of that. One of those things is not like the others, kind of Sesame Street deals. So Fox Valley, we are a little different, and so I wanted to support my team today, so I wore my Fox Valley shirt over my Kaneland shirt, but I'm part of both teams, so pleased to be part of both teams. I'm going to give you a little background just on how we came up with our school improvement plan and why it's a little different because we're not part of the same process. You're not going to offend me if you stop me in the midst of it and ask a question. I've never been in a room with a meeting with Chris Weiss that someone didn't ask a question. Hi, Chris. And so I'd be happy to entertain that. But just to remind you, Fox Valley, we work with 7 school districts. We have 8 high schools. And right now, all of them are on different plans and different schedules. So some are, like Kaneland is Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Friday, and shortened Wednesday. Geneva is Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday with Fun Friday. St. Charles is, anyway, they're all different. And so for us, the question is not like every other day, it's just who's there. We actually take attendance on who's there. So if you're the auto instructor and you're looking at skills, you'd say, this week we're focusing on the tire machine. So you're going to learn to take a tire off the rim, you're going to learn to repair a hole, you're going to learn to mount a tire, and you're going to learn to balance it. Mr. Lawler, I don't remember seeing you earlier this week. If you haven't done these 2 skills, we're practicing that right now, so please join me over here. The rest of you are going to work on this, and when you're all ready to test on that, you tell us and we'll test you on those skills. So that's kind of where we're at. Now, in the midst of that, you know that we work with 3 community colleges, and most of our classes are also offered for dual credit. So we have to meet the college standard. We can do that even with the shortened attendance piece often because we meet every day generally and we have longer classes. So we still get the time in, but it's a little difficult for us. Over the last few years, of course, that means that our goals have been focused on college credit and industry standards or certifications because those are things that we can measure easily and they're really distinct. The other part of that, remember, Fox Valley, unlike Kaneland, where you have a longer period, perhaps 12 years, our whole student body changes, at least half of it changes every year. So we really don't keep students, 2 years is a max, but a lot of times we change more than that. So we're a lot more like a community college that way. So we always try to set our goals that are immediate and measurable and tied to a bigger standard than ours. Having said that, with the situation this year, there are a number of those certifications that we're struggling with. So for instance, you have to have so many hours in the CNA program in clinical experience in order to get your state license. Right now, we're not in the clinical experience, so we can't promise that. We're still training to those standards, but we can't promise the student's going to take those tests. And so in writing our goal this year, we really couldn't say, well, we're going to see an increase in the number of students achieving the certificate or the credential, because we can't promise it. So we asked ourselves, and you met, by the way, I have quite a bit of new staff this year. So we started talking about what are the common things that we do. And the things that we work on in every program are what used to be called soft skills or employability skills or 21st century skills. And so slightly more background, years ago as a state, we worked with all of the state vocational schools and developed a series of statewide assessments in our areas so that we would have some sort of normed exams that we could do some comparison and talk about with our students. A few years back, we sold those exams that we developed in Illinois to a company called Precision Exams. And we didn't get any money. What we got is Precision Exams has 300 exams, and I gave you a list of all the different exams that they offer with all the standards. And we get a really big discount on all of those. We get access to them because we helped develop some of them. So one of those that they offer is something called their 21st century success skills. And so this year, in order to make sure that everybody is getting something and to help us tie all that together, we are having all of our students take these tests. And if you look about the third page from the back, you'll see an example in woodworking of how we can customize this process for each program. But there are some real commonalities that we do. And so, for instance, we always have had our students develop and write a resume, and we give them a professional interview. This year, those interviews are going to be done as Zoom interviews. But we're still continuing the process. They're still going to write the resume. That's part of one of these skills. So we're establishing the baseline this year. And one of the other reasons we wanted to work with 21st century skills and precision, I have a remote proctoring option with this company. So because when our students are out of our building, we're working on the theory and the textbook and those book portions. When they're with us, old habits, they're not in this building, but you know where I meant. When they're with us, we're very heavy into the hands-on and application piece because they're not welding at home with crackers and cheese whiz, okay? So we got to have them with us to do those things. But I can have them take this exam proctored remotely and still get all the results. And so, long story, but anyway, our school improvement goal and all-in student growth goal is related to this. Every individual program still has an individual growth goal based on certain skills or things that we're working with. So that's really those pieces. I think I also mentioned as a organization, we've developed a strategic plan, and so one of our goals is to see the strategic plan adopted by our Fox Valley Board this year. As part of that, we're looking at developing an overall facilities plan that we can use as part of our budgeting process. And, you know, I'd have to pull it up. You guys have the slide, and I don't. What else do I have on there, please? Job shadowing internships. Thank you. Those have been a little more difficult for us right now with the COVID piece. We're not getting out as much. But we are working with the partners that we have in industry to have them be part of developing the facility plan and identify job opportunities. And our goal long-term is to see every one of our students who are with us for 2 years have an internship or job shadow opportunity as part of their process with us. So I talked a lot, and I'm not used to you guys not asking any questions. So anything for me?
Dr. Birchall, I think it's creative what you've done, right? This is a creative problem solving, so good on that. But I do have a question. So what can we do to help support these students to get these certifications, even if they don't finish them this year? Is there something we can do when they leave us to help support them find that end goal? 'Cause I mean, a lot of them go for those certifications, right?
Right. So some of the processes we've put in place, so let's say it's something such as our EMT program, which anything in the healthcare right now is a little iffy for us to get out there, although I may have nursing students going out as early as November 10th. I think we have a new partner in the area, so we're hopeful in that. One of the things we've done is you can't take the certification exam, the EMT basic exam, and it's a national exam now, until you're 18. So we have long placed our students in study groups based on their birthdays, because if you finish the program with us in May, but you have a July birthday, you essentially don't deal with the material until you take the exam, and you may think you're going to do it on your own, but you got to be a pretty dedicated 18-year-old to study that on your own. So we put them in study groups, and we try to coordinate them meeting someplace. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to work now. It could be a Zoom meeting, but we're trying to do some of that. We also, in things like the automotive program or our pilot HVAC program, our instructors have become the proctor for this area, and so we can offer the test in our facility, so we don't have to ask them to go someplace. Now, say it's automotive and ASE, which we're trying to get our students ASE certified in brakes and air conditioning and various things. Normally in a year, you would see a second-year student be able to test and maybe certify in 3 or 4, really good student, maybe 5 areas. We may not get that this year, but we want to make sure that every student gets at least one certification. And what our business partners are telling us, if we can graduate somebody who's EPA 608 certified, so they've got their refrigerant license, we'll work with them that first year, and then we'll help them get sheet metal training. We'll help them get those other pieces, because they're still going to come to us with really valuable skills. So we don't have a perfect answer, Dr. Lawler. We're just
No, I appreciate your creative problem solving. These are good solutions, so I appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right.
The last, excuse me, the last piece before we wrap up, as we progress through the year, there's several other areas of focus that we are always planning, developing, putting teams together. They're not necessarily school improvement goals where we're doing data collection, but there are things that are constantly on our plate that we are having conversations with staff members, with other administrators, with our cabinet, and that first one being our Kaneland Connects plan. So much work was put into that, and unfortunately that had to come to a halt last year with our school closure. But we have since gotten together in small groups, and we've developed those teams. We've developed some matrix to measure them. We're looking at what the implementation and rollout can be for a large scale for our whole district, all of our staff, all of our community members. With that, and what you'll see with a lot of these things is being responsive to our needs now. So looking at different learning structures due to the pandemic, planning out what it would look like, and as we've shared in previous meetings, if we were to go to a full remote plan, having a lot of specific conversations with families and problem solving for unique individual situations, for different learning structures, for sudden changes in the home life and in the work environment from home. So adapting some of what we currently have in place and being as proactive as we can for something that seems to, it's slowed down and changing from a daily or hourly basis to changing every week or so. And the last piece that comes with that, that we have a really good jump start on, is a distance learning professional development. So we've developed these modules, and as the need could possibly arise, being able to put those modules into place, it's geared towards our teachers and students and in their interaction. The resource that we used to build that was done by a world-renowned educational researcher, and they have since put out one for parents for distance learning. We've just got those in, starting to break that down as an ed service department and put together what that could look like as an additional resource for our parents. But again, not necessarily data collected and monitored, but things that we are having constant conversations on how to improve or implement throughout the year.
Another piece of that focus area, as you heard all the principals say and Patrick just kind of share, is really finding ways to have our students and staff remain connected when they are separated in a variety of learning structures, and how we can let students realize you're not just part of a class of 8 to 15 to 20, but that's a larger class of when you put A and B and full remote back together, and then you're also a huge part of across district classes. And so finding ways to connect our full remote with our hybrid A with our hybrid B are all really part of our focus areas, as well as staff members. Staff members have been, as you heard the principals talk about, doing many virtual PD experiences, and they're missing that connection of getting to know our new staff members, getting to know staff that have shifted from one building to the other building. And so we're focused on how can we build those connections among all of our community. Another huge one is the Ignite conference that comes up the Monday in November of Thanksgiving week. Typically, we brought all 500 some staff into one location, all in-person sessions. That is not feasible this year by any means. And so we really tried to problem solve based on our professional development needs. How can we offer pre-recorded self-paced sessions, remote live sessions, and then capped in-person sessions with social distancing in different classrooms at Meredith. And so that whole process of the Ignite conference, which we have done for about 5 years, will look totally different this year. And then finally, we have built proficiency tables for 3 of our main core values. And in the spring, we'll be working on how do we get to that level and expectation of proficiency shared with students, and what will that teacher clarity and student clarity look like for how we behave within those core values. And so that will be coming up further in the school year, but as something that we're working on this year. All of that being said, what questions do you have on tons of information we just shared?
So, while you're working toward the goals, are you at least understanding and thinking of contingency plans, because you don't know what could happen? And are you, at least, I worry that, you're going so hard at it. You need to give yourself some flexibility in these times, I think, and at least entertain the idea that it might not happen in 4 years, that you may not be able to move on to that goal of the the personalized and customized learning. And I just wonder if you're, at least planning for that, or at least have it in the back of your mind that it could happen, and if so, that what a 5th year might look like.
Absolutely. I think we've looked at a variety of different things. The educational service department used to be split into 2 locations, and now we're literally in the same office with 3 people every day. And I'd say we do that constantly every day, the what if game. Mm-hmm. And so there's been a wide variety of what ifs with any one of these tasks, let alone the goals. But, what if Ignite doesn't happen? What if this doesn't happen? Mm-hmm. What if, everyone's full remote? What if we can bring everyone face to face? How would, structures change? And we kind of have all those plans initially brainstormed, and so that we're trying to kind of ride the wave and see which plan you fall on at that given time. The one thing about personalized learning truly is no matter what learning structure you're in, you can personalize. It's just a different type of training and a different type of preparing the staff member and student. But if you set the foundation for getting to know your kids and set the foundation for students to advocate, then personalized learning can happen anywhere in any learning structure. And so we at least have that benefit of there's no one learning structure that would halt personalized learning because it should and could be done in all structures. But timeline, we've talked about, what if it goes 4 years, 5 years?
And I
Hopefully we're around for 10.
on top of that, not just that personalized learning realm, but with as we build our proficiency tables and look at some new things, some different things of looking at timeframes. So we, for example, with our strategic plan, obviously we would have loved to kick the school year off with that, but we know that some other priorities arose prior to being able to do that. The work that would go into proficiency table writing, that would go into getting teams together, we have to reevaluate prioritizing that. So substitute teachers are at a premium. Our teachers being in the class, we don't want to be able to work. Traditionally, we have the luxury of time to pull them and sub them out during the day, where we don't have that anymore. Not only because of substitutes, but just the value of them being in front of their students. So several things that were scheduled throughout. Our commitment teams were supposed to kick off in October. We've looked at extending that into the spring and have had to have some difficult conversations, as passionate as we are in those meetings, knowing that the reality is we have to take it a couple weeks at a time or a month or so at a time. And super excited about the keynote speaker that was coming in November. We had to have a tough discussion and realize that his impact is best suited for in-person, where all 400 or 500 of our staff can be there to see it and live that energy. We've put that and shelved that until next year, just to prioritize some more immediate needs.
Well, I don't want to speak for the other board members, but I think, it's okay if it's not okay. It's okay if it doesn't happen. I mean, I think it's easy to say that when you have a group that is so dedicated, and I know nobody's going to, think, oh, we can just slack off. That isn't nobody here is like that. I guess I'm a little concerned. It's a little bit the opposite, and I just want to say it's okay if it doesn't get there.
Yeah, I would like to piggyback on what Teresa's saying. You've got a lot, right? Like, there's a lot on your plate. Social emotional learning, personalized learning, standards-based grading, proficiency tables. Like, we keep listing, right? Like, so how are you trying to fight the fatigue or the burnout that could be happening with all these things moving? Like, what are you guys doing to make sure that, there's a lot of energy still in it and people aren't feeling like apathetic to it?
We've had those conversations. We just had one this morning with our administrative team at one of the grade spans of, okay, so this is kind of the pulse that we're having, listening from Dr. Atkins and Dr. Layden from the teachers union or the non-certified union, looking for that feedback, asking the administrators, what are you hearing in the buildings from your staff? And then when we hear that response, what do we need to slow down? What timeline do we need to pause?
I think
not halt or quit, but if we were going to do 3 major trainings, which one is prioritized to maybe do in a virtual setting only, and what time can we give? The interesting part, we just spent the day working on the Ignite conference, and I would say probably 50% of the sessions are on self-care and meditation, yoga, knitting, and that doesn't sound like any of our priorities here, but it is, because that's SEL, and that's what staff need. And so they're going to have some choices to do that, along with learning about the learner profile and personalized learning, so that they can balance and reflect, I need a day to learn some new yoga stuff, but then I'll learn learner profile later. And so we've really been trying to monitor those conversations with our building administrators of what are you hearing, what are you feeling, and then let's stop and prioritize. And so we had that conversation started today. We have it coming up with the full K-12 team, and we need to.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because I think if you want to meet these goals, right, like just plowing through to get to them might not be the greatest plan, right? It might be better to slow it down and, like Teresa said, go to a 5th year then, right? Because that allows for like a natural kind of regrouping, refreshing, and I think in this time we need that, right? We say it for our students, we know that they need it. I think our teachers and our parents, they also need it too, right? So
I think one of our biggest strengths is that we always tackle these problems in a group, in a very collaborative group, where each of us has a very unique background and a very unique perspective, And I think I speak for every single person in here, incredibly passionate about what we want to do for our students. Sure. And we do a good job of checking each other of that's fantastic and that's a great 2-year plan now, but in reality, we need to, we have the team put together to have those collaborative conversations, and they're not always easy, they're not always fun. It's kind of, oh man, we're going to have to build a contingency plan for that, or we're going to have to put that on the back burner for a little bit. But we work well together to bring different perspectives of sometimes it gets hard when you live and breathe one piece day in and day out to have a fresh perspective, say, well, have you thought about these things? Or you may be seeing this piece of personalized learning, but we're not going to be able to get there if we're burnt out in October. So I think there is the strength in those numbers, and we have those teams together and work well together collaboratively.
Good to hear.
And what a great way to teach adaptability to students. I mean,
Sure.
I think the students that have gone through this will come out stronger for it, so thanks.
So one thing Mrs. Maris talked about was just identifying struggling students and all hands on deck to you know, advocate for them and do what's best for them. Are there significant themes you're seeing that, I don't know, I'm just curious kind of what the biggest struggles are. I know clearly what some of them could be, but, you know.
A difficult question to answer from an ed service. Ours come from more so of learning structures, and we feel that a lot of those questions leading into the school year. I know we had anticipated access to technology being somewhat of an issue. Our department hasn't heard that, but it'd be interesting to open it up to building principals that might be fielding those questions. Some of what we're seeing is those application days and the work that can be done, should be done. What does it look like? How do we function knowing that Dr. Mom's my teacher, but she has B-Day students and I'm an A-Day kid, I can't access her for another day. Those are some of the things that we try to problem solve on a daily basis.
Are you primarily, is it like identifying like students that are struggling with that, like, or is it systemically? I'm just curious.
I think a little of both. I know we've talked a little bit about, especially in the application days, time management and self-motivation, and how as a student, I may know my teacher has assigned these 3 things, but without them kind of monitoring me on site, how do I motivate myself to complete that? Or how do I see the true intent and purpose and harm if I don't? And so I think we've had, and we just discussed today at the K-5 level, so what does that process look like for accountability? What can we do on site when we realize someone hasn't done application when they return? And what are those progressive steps to model that accountability, self-motivation, and time management? And that it can't all come 9 p.m. the day before you go back face-to-face, when you have 2 days of application back-to-back. And that's something we're bringing back to the K-12 discussion later this October, because we are hearing that from each grade span, of that application time without someone kind of monitoring you on that day. How do you find that self-motivation and accountability to complete those tasks? And what's the relevancy of the task, and being very clear about the relevancy and impact on your learning progression. And so those, I would say, are probably our biggest areas that we've heard from staff.
Are you finding like significant absences being an issue? You know, like when someone's out for 1 to 2 weeks or however that's gone?
Somewhat the same. I hear it more in the application day.
More application day.
Than being a quarantined absent.
Any other questions?
Yes. So we're in our final stages of initial pre-data collection and final level evaluation. Is there anything that you're expecting there to watch out for, or to reiterate what you're seeing at this moment as we're collecting data?
Of the learner profile data, because that's not all in?
Yes.
There haven't seen anything glaring or trends that we wouldn't have anticipated. There's only a handful left to score at various grade levels, but I think what we've seen has been pretty indicative of what we've seen in the past. So knock on wood, I don't think we're expecting curveballs or anything that is drastically going to change what we see as an outline for professional development that we provide. It always could happen, but the trend so far has been pretty much what we've expected.
So you've been pre-looking at some of this as coming in, or we're waiting till the end?
Yep. So as they come in, we separate them out and assign them to the appropriate people and score them.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you for
Thank you.
your time tonight, guys. All right, I think that's all for new business, so we're on to Superintendent Board Report.
Yep. Also, thank you to Ed Services and our principals for all of that work and dedication to put that plan together. Look forward to seeing it come to fruition and getting some results in the spring, so thank you. A couple quick updates that I have. The Kaneland Foundation continues to meet via Zoom throughout the year, and last night they did agree to continue the engagement activity or engagement process with the Marquette Hamlin Group, who led the golf outing in the auction this year, with the goal of hopefully to consider the foundation funding and hiring an executive director into the summer and for next year. And so that's kind of the goal that they have right now, and always the fund bylaws. They reviewed bylaws to make sure that the bylaws would be appropriate for an executive director. Also wanted to share, October is also the month where the state report card, the Illinois school report card, and the district report card comes out. Wanted to share that there will be some already known inaccuracies in the data due to the spring testing cycle that wasn't fully implemented. So you will see on the report card, there'll be some data points and there'll be categories that'll say these will be slightly askew. These are going to be abandoned altogether. The 5 essentials was abandoned altogether because some districts hadn't completed it by the time we went on full remote last year. So the school report card results will look slightly different. But along with that, I did want to share that at the, right now we plan through the November 9th board meeting to include an update on the school report card data and our indicators of success, because that is following right after that information is made public. So Dr. Mumm, Mr. Raleigh, and I usually present that information. So we still do plan on that because that is about a week after the information goes public, which is usually right around Halloween, the end of October. Also wanted to share that I don't know if you received your postcard, but for the IASB Virtual Summit this year, if you recall, the Triple I Conference in Chicago that takes place in towards the end of November is canceled. So the Virtual Summit this year is a one-day only. It's November 20th, and it's $50. So if you didn't receive this postcard yet, I do have another copy of it, and I'll forward that to you in the weekly update. So if you do want to sign up for it, it is on November 20th from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. There's a couple general sessions and breakout sessions. And so if you are interested, after you see the format and outline and your availability, you can let me know, and Beth can register all of us and make sure you can get logged in. And then the last thing, as you know from the last meeting, Mrs. Junk volunteered to do our resolution committee report. So Mrs. Junk has signed up. She has her notes right there, and I have them here too.
Wow,
she
that's
has
great.
Signed up for the workshop at the end of middle of October, the 21st, I think.
Somewhere in there.
Something like, I think the 21st. So at our next meeting on the 26th, I'll make sure that you have these if you haven't received these yet. So if you could please review these in advance. So we'll talk through them on the 26th, and we'll have our board stance on the various resolutions. And then when Mrs. Junk goes to the meeting or virtually attends the meeting in November, she'll be able to vote on behalf of our board.
Good.
Mrs. Junk, anything you wanted to provide an update on that topic?
I'm still trying to make sense of all of it.
Okay. Right now, happy to sit down with you and talk through those if we need to. Thank you. Those are all I had. I know Dr. Fuchs had one.
Yes, I just wanted to let the board members know I'll be hosting a virtual finance advisory committee meeting tomorrow night with the FAC. If any of you are interested in participating, send me a quick email and I'll send you the link and the packet.
Great. All right, we'll move on to topics for future agendas, if there are any.
I have one.
Go for it. What was that, Ryan?
I said I have one.
Okay, great.
We've hired staff We've done school improvement plans based on a plan that we haven't seen yet, and during that presentation, someone said winter to fall of next year before we see it. I don't find that acceptable. I think we need the plan now. If we've already hired staff, made plans. I mean, we've done countless activities in order to reach this point, so I would like to see the plan.
So what's your thinking? We could do a thumbs up, thumbs down, or I don't know if you wanted to talk about what you were thinking with timing.
We can, as Dr. Mumm and Mr. Ali and I talked about this, and Cabinet talked about this, this is one of those topics that I know, Mr. Carey, you just mentioned that you expected to be done and patterned and scored and be able to get it done in a certain amount of time. But then Mr. Lawler and Mrs. Witt both shared the timing piece of it. Is there something that needs to be slowed down or selectively abandoned? Those are the things that we are working through right now as we try to balance the day-to-day operations of making sure staff and students are ready with the future planning and future push. So what I can tell you is we are having that conversation, and within a couple weeks or a month, we'll have a better idea of exactly what it's going to look like in the timeline. So what I can do is I can bring back to you and tell you what that timeline is going to look like and what it's going to be moving forward.
So are you comfortable bringing this up at the next meeting and we can thumbs up, thumbs down?
I'm confused,
Or, no.
I
Okay.
guess. We just went through a school improvement plan based on the plan. I guess I don't, so I don't mean to hash out the whole thing, but there must be a plan if you're doing school improvement plans based on a plan, so I'm lost, so I guess I need information.
Right. Well, I think the difference is the school improvement plan that we have and the data that we're looking at are some existing structures, as you know, the existing topics that we've had and that we're moving forward with. But the actual Kaneland Connects plan is the 5 commitment levels, and it's multi-tiered by groups, and we planned out what 2, 3, and 4, and 5 years would look like. That's the planning that we missed out on from March through August to be able to put the multiple years together, the multiple indicators, the targets for those indicators. That's the piece that had to be selectively abandoned now to use the time to get the school year up and running. So now that the school year is up and running, we're trying to balance where the time, effort, and energies need to be spent. And right now, the day-to-day operations and supporting staff and students is taking the majority of the time. So that creation of the full Kaneland Connects plan is something that's been on hold for right now.
So I guess, I'm sorry, I'm still lost.
Is there like an outline of that plan then that administration's working off of? Because I agree with Ryan, like what was just presented, they said multiple times, was based on the new plan. So it feels like the plan is there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, there is a plan, there is the structure, there is the outline, the timeline, all of those things are done. It's just, we didn't want to present it to you and say, here's half of it, here's a third of it, because it is something that is a multi-year plan, but the specific indicators that you usually use from year to year just haven't been finalized yet because we just didn't have the time to do those things.
Got it.
Okay. Can we get next year? Not the whole 5 years. Can I get, I mean, we've spent thousands of man hours and hired staff and school improvement plans. Just tell me what next year looks like.
So is that a thumbs up, thumbs down? Or is that, what are you thinking, Todd, how do you want to?
It's a thumbs up that I think everybody's going to want that, but the response is going to be, we will get it to you as soon as we can. So I know you probably all we want that. We want to be able to do it. It was when March hit and we had to cancel that last meeting, we tried to do it virtually. We tried to get feedback from committee members, and it doesn't work as well as when you're in person. And then it went right to plan a remote hybrid model. So some of those steps are just not done yet. But as far as an outline for a jumping off point and what a first year could look like, we can bring that.
Okay. And I understand the world came unglued about 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, but just tell me when you're going to tell me. If I understand that you can't have it all done, and
right.
But we're into this model of A and B days and whatever, and I don't think anybody sees it going away anytime soon. So
I will provide a definitive update of when you will hear either the first year or a finalized plan. We will get that.
Thank you.
We'll get that
That's,
for you.
so there's no thumbs up, thumbs down, we'll go from there? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool.
Yes.
Okay, and then Pedro, do you have one?
Yes, actually, I have several. First of all, I want to acknowledge Mr. Bateman, and as traditionally, someone will contact him for information, right, on his questions?
From public comment?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, just want to acknowledge that. A couple meetings ago, we passed a BLM resolution, and leading up to that, there was a comment made that we want to formulate some awareness, some education, or what have you, because it's happening now, we need to do it now, was how it was phrased. So my question is, when should we hear what that plan is to support that? Are we going to hear it this year, next year? I mean, it's happening now, and that's why we passed it.
Right. That's this year.
Is this year?
Yeah, that's as important as it is and as imperative it is for our community and our student body and our staff, again, with the manpower that we have right now to keep everything else moving forward and to monitor the other factors of the hybrid model and the remote model. Those are topics that we are discussing, and we're trying to delicately balance it so that it's done and done well, as opposed to just done while we're trying to balance the other things. So it is on the list. Both of those items are on the list of topics for us to discuss.
Okay.
So as far as a set timeline, we are still trying to figure out and build truly what the capacity is going to look like, whether it's a district-wide committee, are we bringing in people to train, are we doing student surveys first, are we following up with the small groups that met over the summer? Those are all the things that we're considering.
But some type of training is happening this year.
It will happen this year, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And awareness, yes, for sure.
Thank you. The other one is a suggestion. I mean, it's a thumbs up, thumbs down type of thing. As we know, we're spending a lot of money to be able to allow our students, whether they're remote or 50-50 or what have you, whatever people's choices are, cost-wise. I'd like to suggest that we somehow put in our cumulative costs as we keep on going on our website, so people are aware of it. I just like to advertise it, and I think it's important to make people aware how much it's really costing us. I mean, we run on a, what kind of budget are we at? 60-something million a year, or whatever it is. And I know this is not as significant as that, but I know it's gonna, at the end, it's gonna be pretty high. I mean, everything, we've added FTEs, we've added, obviously, our cleaning that happens every day, every night, what have you. So anyway, I'd like to suggest that we like to see if we can potentially put it on our website, at least as we accumulate it over time.
So when you say put it on the website, are you thinking like it's a, let's say, a report to the board or in the finance under kind of Dr. Fuchs' section?
Report to the community.
Pardon me?
The report to the community, so they can see it on.
Yeah, you don't
online.
mean like a running like banner.
I don't care how they do it.
You just mean the data there and
Yeah.
whatever they look like. So is that a thumbs up, thumbs down, or do people have questions before we?
I guess my initial question would be how easy to collect. I mean, what are you counting as COVID expenses? I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea. I guess
as I mentioned, we've hired FTEs specifically for that. I think what was the number, 700,000, at least what was asked. I know we spend, I forget the number, monthly, contractual wise, that was added because of cleaning. There's obviously supplies that come in, the whole works. I mean, there are things that we wouldn't have done.
I'm not opposed to your idea.
I mean,
where do you draw the line?
There's some things, are we keeping it kind of separate, if you will?
Yes, all COVID expenses at this point are being coded as COVID so that we can track them. And if you look in your consent agenda under the first quarter budget report. I did put the number in there of our cumulative expenses. I can also break those out for you as needed.
I'm talking.
So I do have the cumulative in there. At this point, there are two grants, one for $153,000, and then the other one, we don't know how much we'll be able to get. We're working on it. It's a FEMA grant. So while I can report the expenditures for COVID, we also need to know that some of that will be offset, and I can continue to report those offsets as I know about them. But all COVID expenditures are being coded as COVID. They're being paid for out of their regular accounts, but they're identified as a COVID expenditure. And the definition for us of a COVID expenditure, as people are doing that, would you be buying this if it weren't for COVID?
Sure.
Would you be spending this if it weren't for COVID? If the answer is yes, then don't put it in a COVID account or label it COVID. If the answer is no, please make sure that it's marked clearly as COVID so that we can continue to track that.
I just want our community to know as well.
And so when you're asking about the website, my question is similar to, I think, President Sparber's. That number, as I mentioned, is in the first quarter budget report, which then is posted on the website under the board packets. Are you looking for something more different?
Someone that visits our website, they see it. It's right there, whether it's scrolling or whatever many pieces of scrolls that we have. I know it changes.
So you don't want it buried in a report, not buried,
Yeah, I mean,
buried isn't the right word.
Yeah.
You don't want it lost in a report, you want something glaring on the website that says we spent $1 million in
Right.
COVID.
Okay,
Up
to
to this
what
month,
end?
we spent so much.
I'm wondering to what end? I understand being transparent.
Correct.
But it is on the website. I guess I'm wondering what you're hoping the community will get out of it. Just seeing that we're going above and beyond financially, or are you hoping it'll offset, if they don't like, if it, the consequences of spending that, having to overspend that money now, I guess I'm wondering what you're wanting them
I'll be
to,
very
what you're
blunt.
wanting the community members to get.
I'll be very blunt. You guys know I am. I don't
Yes.
want at contractual years that our unions come in and say you did it on our backs.
Okay.
If it wasn't for us, it wouldn't have happened. Yes, they are part of it. And that's exactly what I point out, that we're doing it all together.
Okay.
The other option that we do have, or for consideration if the board is interested, we do have the COVID-19 page that has updates on health, life safety, all of those things that are regularly updated when we get new information. If you would like, we could take the information from Dr. Fuchs's report that she's running and his expenses are spent. If you would like, we can put the document onto that sheet. It's not necessarily front and center, but it's also something that's not buried. It is on the COVID-19 page, so if anybody wants to learn more about COVID-19 related topics, from expenditures to safety to PPE, it's all at least on the same page and can be found in the same place.
That seems logical
Very
to.
reasonable.
I would thumbs up that.
Yeah, I would thumbs up there.
It seems logical to include that information of, hey, we're doing gloves and gowns and plastic and blah, 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 and oh, by the way, we spent this much on it. It all seems to tie together on that page.
Does that seem doable for
Yeah.
you, Dr. Fuchs? Yeah?
Yes, it does.
All right, so we thumbs up? Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have anything else, Mr. Rivas?
That is it.
That is
Thank
it.
you.
Any other topics for future agendas? No? Okay. Go ahead.
You might have answered this, and my memory might be just escape and not working tonight, but we started that facilities study plan, $80,000, and you might have already told me this, and I'm just forgetting, but is that moving forward this year, or are we pushing it off for a year?
It is moving forward, and I know that Dr. Fuchs, I'll turn it over to her in a second, but I know that we have some emails we were waiting to hear back from the architect firm and the high school and middle school. I think representatives had some last minute feedback to put together. for them to put together the next presentation. So Julianne, after you spoke with them, what's the next step or the next timeline?
Sure. I think, let me clarify the question, please. Are you speaking specifically of the high school master facility plan?
Yes, ma'am.
Or are you talking about the district facility planning?
No, the one that we had, the committee that I was on with you for the
Okay.
architects, yes, ma'am.
We're looking at getting that committee back together within the month. I believe the architects have finished all the conversations now that Dr. Layden was just mentioning. We just finished that last Tuesday, I believe, was the last piece of the puzzle. I have it on my list to circle back to the architects to set up the meeting, and now it will be a matter of schedules with the administration and the committee.
Okay.
I do know that they've got a draft. I haven't seen it yet, and so we're getting close. We are also somewhat under the timeline of needing to get that done, because if we're going to do anything at all, we need to get those projects out to bid sooner than later for summer of '21. So yes, all of that stuff is going to start coming up very quickly. Some financial things that are coming up too. Your audit is almost complete. I'm working on the last pieces of it. Again, the COVID kinds of things, we can't emphasize enough, while it is up and running and underway, are consuming lots of our administrative time.
No, and I understand completely if this doesn't get done. I just want to know if it was pushed off completely,
Yeah,
or
it's
if
not
it
pushed
was...
off. We're trying to do it all to the
Okay.
best of our ability.
Okay.
So,
Any other topics? I know, I'm looking at you. Yeah, exactly. All right, any other public comments? This is the second opportunity for public comments. None, we do not have an executive session tonight, and so we'll just move to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Sure.
All those in favor?
All right.
Opposed?